Things may have seemed to come easily for Grace Kelly, and that's just what she wanted the world to see. But being an actress and princess did not shield her from experiencing problems and broken dreams. Her life may have been harder than any of us realize, but she had the winning combinations of strength and sensitivity, dignity and warmth, which helped her to conquer many challenges. Coming up, an intimate portrait of one of the most universally loved leading ladies who fulfilled our favorite fairy tale, Grace Kelly. East Falls is a modest, former mill town on the banks of the Schuylkill River, just outside Philadelphia. But up the hill, at 3901 Henry Avenue, is an impressive brick home built in the early 1920s in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in town. It was home to the builder himself, John B. Kelly, his wife, and their 4 children. Born on November 12, 1929, Grace was the 3rd of those 4 children. Peggy was the eldest, her brother Jack Jr. was next, and Lizanne was the baby of the family, born 4 years after Grace. In 1935, the charismatic John B. Kelly ran for mayor of Philadelphia on the Democratic ticket. He lost by a small margin, but came in closer than any Democrat had done before. He was aggressive and competitive, and he tried to instill these values in his son and daughters. Grace's father was one of 10 children born to strict Irish Catholic immigrants. He began as a bricklayer, but soon started his own contracting firm, Kelly for Brickwork, and managed to build the business into the largest brick firm on the East Coast. He quickly amassed a small fortune. But he was a local celebrity before that, and the city remembers him today. By age 29, Kelly was a champion scholar and won the gold medal in the 1920 Olympics. Grace's mother, Margaret Major Kelly, was also a woman of great achievement. When it was still considered unusual for a woman to attend college, she graduated from Temple University in physical education and eventually became the first female to head the Women's Physical Education Department at the University of Pennsylvania. Grace spent her early years at the very proper Catholic school, Ravenhill Academy. It was at this young age that she was first thrust into the public eye. Together with her mother and sisters, she frequently modeled fashions at local high society fundraising events. The Kelly clan were devout Catholics, attending church regularly at St. Bridget's in Philadelphia. Despite their hard-earned wealth, it could not gain them entrance into mainline society, but social appearances were very important to the proud Kellys. In 1939, at the wedding of their cousin, Grace and her elder sister Peggy were flower girls. Grace is dressed in pale blue, and it's apparent that, even at age 10, Grace knew how to play to a camera. 4 years later, the sweet-looking flower girl would blossom into a popular addition at Stevens High School. Grace's demeanor was, for the most part, very proper, but like most teenagers, she also had a mischievous side.
Well, one day we were out in Grace's convertible, and we were going down to hockey practice, and it was a beautiful day, balmy, full day, and she started the car, and we were going down. She got on the seat and started driving the car with her feet. She took off her shoes and drove the car. Well, I was frightened. Thought she was in complete control of the car, and then when we all hollered and screamed and laughed, she slid down in the seat and took over.
In high school, she began acting and dancing in school plays and community theater, and her yearbook remarkably predicted that she would become a famous star of screen and radio. Even then, her beauty did not go unnoticed, especially at the local boys' academy at Penn Charter.
She always had a lot of boyfriends. I didn't feel she was wild. She was just attractive, and she was kind of a star at Penn Charter. I don't think she ever missed any of the dances or was without a date on the weekends.
After graduating from Stevens High School in June 1947, Grace, in typical Kelly fashion, decided she would become an actress. Her greatest desire was to attend the prestigious American Academy of Performing Arts in New York City, a school that boasted such famous alumni as Katharine Hepburn, Lauren Bacall, and Spencer Tracy. Grace's uncle, George Kelly, was a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright whom Grace had always admired. Though enrollment had closed, the reputation of her Uncle George made the Academy reconsider slipping Grace into the school. They asked her to audition with a selection from her uncle's play, The Torchbearers. They liked what they saw, and she was accepted. Her family, perhaps to indulge her, let her go to New York, convinced she would be back in a month. While studying at the Academy, Grace lived at the Barbizon, a dignified residential hotel for young single women. Marilyn Marsh, then a struggling young performer, became roommates with Grace. Marilyn recalls that Grace had a little recording machine in her room, where Grace would listen to her own voice over and over, trying to improve her speech. With typical Kelly discipline, the nasal Philadelphian accent was replaced by lilting, near-British, perfect diction. A friend at the Academy suggested she could earn good money by modeling. Not surprisingly, the attractive blonde with the appeal of the girl next door began appearing on magazine covers and in national advertising campaigns with Luster cream shampoo, Eye-Panna toothpaste, Old Gold cigarettes, and beauty creams. By the time Grace graduated from the Academy, she was doing fashion spreads for newsreels at $400 a week. Fabulous money in 1947. One of the first things she did with her earnings was to pay back her father for her school tuition and bills at the Barbizon. It was important to Grace that she prove to her father that she could be self-sufficient. At the age of 19, Grace finished classes at the Academy. Her graduation performance was in The Philadelphia Story. Amazingly, this is a role she would recreate on the silver screen 7 years later in the musical High Society. Her first professional acting job was at the Bucks County Playhouse in New Hope, Pennsylvania, appearing in a summer stock production of her Uncle George's play, The Torchbearers, and later a play called The Heiress. Miss Kelly won favorable reviews and set her sights on Broadway. A few months later, Grace indeed made her Broadway debut in Strindberg's tragedy, The Father. But her early success in the theater did not last long. She would go on 38 casting calls over the next 2 years before she would again be hired on Broadway. However, Grace was quickly discovered by the emerging television industry.
The first time I ever saw Grace Kelly, she was appearing in the play The Father. And I thought she was one of the most beautiful and delightful actresses I had ever seen. Called her into the office the very next day to read for the role of Bethel Merriday, Sinclair Lewis book, which we were doing on the Philco Goodyear Playhouse. Cast her, and that was our beginning.
In short order, she starred in over 60 live teledramas, such as Studio One and the Philco Television Playhouse.
Who's this girl?
Oh, just a girl.
But what's her name?
Oh, I don't even remember her name. That was taken at Bar Harbor before the war. She was visiting friends there.
I'm jealous of her.
I don't even remember her name.
I'm jealous of everyone you knew before you met me.
In 1951, this television exposure helped her to land her first role in the film 14 Hours. Her role was a small one, yet it brought the first of many offers for long-term studio contracts. Grace turned them all down. She did not want to give up her hard-earned independence and still had her heart set on the stage. From Hollywood, Grace went to Colorado to do summer stock theater at the highly respected Elitch Gardens. Then one day in early August, she received a telegram from film producer Stanley Kramer. he thought she'd be right to play the female lead in a western called High Noon. Amazingly, she had been hired without even an audition. The wheels of fate were set in motion for Hollywood's next great star.
I mean it. If you won't go with me now, I'll be on that train when it leaves here.
I've got to stay.
Grace starred in her first major motion picture opposite Gary Cooper. The movie won 2 Academy Awards, but Grace was very dissatisfied with her own performance. To a friend, she said, "You look into Gary Cooper's face and you see everything he's thinking." I looked into my own face and saw nothing. I knew what I was thinking, but it didn't show. Grace was considered for the part, thanks to a young agent at MCA, Jay Cantor. He immediately saw something special in this young actress.
I didn't look in a crystal ball, but I really had a feeling that this young lady was going to really go right to the top. She seemed to have a charisma about herself, and she seemed to have a lot of confidence in herself, and she seemed to just generally, she knew what she wanted, and she really didn't seem to doubt herself. Yes, I really felt she was going to become a big star.
Undaunted by her lackluster reviews, Grace returned to New York and enrolled with the distinguished acting teacher Sanford Meisner. Her training obviously paid off. Director John Ford was casting a new Clark Gable picture, which would be filmed in Africa. Grace wanted very much to appear in Mogambo. The allure of starring with this screen legend of Hollywood made Grace reluctantly agree to sign a 7-year contract with MGM. Although the press probed for details of a possible Kelly-Gable romance, their relationship remained platonic. But this was not the last time the press would link Grace to her co-stars. She was, after all, one of the most desirable women in Hollywood. Grace was pleased with her performance in Mogambo, and the press seemed to agree. She was nominated for an Oscar as Best Supporting Actress. She didn't win, but there was no doubt her star was on the rise. Alfred Hitchcock had seen an earlier screen test and found Grace's delicate refinement very attractive. He cast her in his upcoming movie Dial M for Murder, and soon she became one of his favorite actresses. She excelled in this suspenseful drama, bringing the successful stage play to the screen. Grace was the only female in the cast, and almost every man on the set became enamored with the 23-year-old beauty. Her penchant for older men gave Hollywood gossip columnists plenty to talk about when Grace was romantically linked with married co-star Ray Milland. Eventually, it was she who ended the relationship. As production came to a close, Hitchcock revealed that he had already selected Grace for the starring role in his next movie, Rear Window. It co-starred Jimmy Stewart and was to start immediately. But Grace faced a dilemma. She was also offered the lead role in On the Waterfront, opposite the handsome Marlon Brando. Grace made the decision to continue with Mr. Hitchcock. As the character Lisa Fremont, Grace Kelly brought to life an enchanting combination of fire and ice, which was to captivate audiences for the rest of her career.
And you won't be able to take your eyes off the glowing beauty of Grace Kelly, who shares the heart and curiosity of James Stewart in this story of a romance shadowed by the terror of a horrifying secret.
A Grace Kelly tidal wave swept over the country when Rear Window opened in the summer of 1954.
She was so stunningly beautiful and just so electrifying, you just couldn't take your eyes off of her. I don't think I've ever seen a human being as ethereal, as beautiful as Grace was.
Grace's next film was The Bridges at Toko Ri. This time, her leading man was heartthrob William Holden, and soon a romance sparked between the two. Once again, celebrity tabloids scandalized Grace's affair with another married co-star, especially when they were cast together in her next movie, The Country Girl. Although their relationship was kept quiet on the set, the rumors took their toll on Grace. Grace even sought professional counseling to deal with the pressure of life as a celebrity. When Grace and Holden broke up, she managed to focus all of her energy on what was to be the most demanding role of her career.
And I might forgive even you, Mr. Dodd, if you can keep him up long enough for me to get out from under. All I want is my own name and a modest job to buy sugar for my coffee. You can't believe that, can you? You can't believe that a woman is crazy out of her mind to live alone in one room by herself.
It was extraordinary the way she went from one film to another in a very short period of time, always working with important leading men, always working with important directors. I also thought that the agency that I was working for, MCA at the time, did a wonderful job in terms of getting her loan-outs from MGM when they wanted her for their own productions.
And no wonder. There was no stopping the Kelly phenomenon. Just a short time ago, she had been modeling for magazines and advertisements. Now those same magazines were putting her on their covers with feature articles detailing her life. Grace went to Colombia that spring to film Green Fire, in which she played a South American coffee plantation owner. She falls in love with an emerald prospector, played by Stuart Granger. It was not her ideal career choice, but Grace was contractually obligated to MGM. This was why she had wanted to avoid signing a studio contract. However, for her next project, she would need no coercion. Hitchcock had persuaded Cary Grant to come out of retirement to film To Catch a Thief in the summer of 1954. He also insisted on employing his favorite actress, Grace Kelly. Just days after finishing Green Fire, her fifth movie in only 8 months, she flew to the south of France to begin filming. It was a marvelous experience for Grace, who this time fell in love with the location. She found the south of France enchanting. Playing opposite her debonair co-star Cary Grant, the role of Francie Stevens is considered Grace's most provocative. The dialogue had a series of suggestive double entendres that Hitchcock admitted were made all the more titillating when uttered by someone as wholesome as Grace Kelly.
Look, John, hold them. Diamonds. Have you ever had a better offer in your whole life? One with everything.
Beyond the beauty, which was palpable, Grace had class and style. She was a lady. You felt that underneath that facade there was passion, which she expressed in her acting, but she did it in such a womanly and ladylike manner that she was enchanting.
Several sequences of the film were shot in and around the Principality of Monaco. In this agonizingly ironic scene, Grace is driving along the same stretch of road where her car crashed down an embankment almost 30 years later. Grace returned to Hollywood to complete her scenes in To Catch a Thief. The end of the production was marked by the gala celebration of Alfred Hitchcock's 50th film. She now had a few months off from film commitments. At this point in her life, she was openly in love with dashing fashion designer Oleg Cassini, who had pursued her to the south of France. But Grace's domineering parents did not approve of the divorced Oleg Cassini for their daughter, and the romance with Oleg would soon end. But if Grace's personal life was suffering, her professional success may have helped ease the pain. In March of 1955, Grace Kelly won the Best Actress Award for The Country Girl.
thrill of this moment keeps me from saying what I really feel. I can only say thank you with all my heart to all who made this possible for me. Thank you.
Grace had now achieved the ultimate measure of success in her field. But soon a twist of fate would force Grace to make one of the most important decisions of her life. Monaco is a picturesque country of 1 square mile, nestled on the exotic south coast of France. Often called the Jewel of the Riviera, rich in history, the principality dates back to the 13th century when it came under the rule of the Grimaldi family. In 1955, Grimaldi's descendant, 32-year-old Prince Rainier, was the ruling monarch and considered one of Europe's most eligible bachelors. Grace was invited to head the U.S. delegation that year at the Cannes Film Festival. On her way to the south of France, she was asked to participate in a photo session at Monaco's palace with Prince Rainier. Grace felt that she did not have enough time, but reconsidered when she was told that the prince had already rearranged his schedule to accommodate her. This meeting, destined to change both their lives, almost did not take place. Grace's hotel lost electric power that morning, and the prince was delayed for an hour. When Rainier finally arrived, he took Grace for a walk around the palace grounds. Just that quickly, romance was in the air. Back in America, Grace wrote Rainier a thank you note. He quickly replied with a letter. Their courtship, born in an instant, would continue quietly by mail, far from the prying eyes of the press. Returning to Hollywood, Grace began her next picture, The Swan. Ironically, she plays the part of a princess who hopes to marry a visiting prince, played by Alec Guinness. Meanwhile, Grace and Rainier's private courtship grew stronger as they continued to correspond. Rainier and Grace both came from powerful families, sharing similar Catholic values. They were also basically shy people, thrust into the public eye. These common bonds seemed to help further solidify their growing love for one another. All of Europe knew that the prince was ready to find a wife. According to a treaty with France, if Rainier did not produce an heir, the principality would revert back to France at the time of his death. A glamorous American actress might be just the thing to encourage tourism and help rebuild Monaco's sagging post-war economy. Meanwhile, at age 26, Grace was also anxious to find a suitable marriage partner. The Christmas of 1955 brought special excitement to the Kelly family in Philadelphia. Rainier was coming for a visit. The press was having a heyday inquiring about the purpose of his first trip to America. Rainier gave the impression that he was merely going to America for a tour and a physical checkup.
Well, there were many stories that you're actively seeking a wife. Would you care to comment on that?
No, I'm not. That you can misspoke.
I see. If you were to marry, what kind of a girl do you have in mind?
I don't know. The best.
Rainier arrived at the Kelly home on Christmas Day. This time, Grace's new suitor passed the Kellys' strict standards. Mrs. Kelly later observed that she knew then and there that his intentions were not just those of a smitten young man. There was purpose in every word and movement, she said. Just 3 days later, Rainier proposed and Grace accepted. Within 2 weeks, a press conference was held in her family home to make the official announcement that the couple would be married in April. Grace was swept away. When the press asked what would now become of her career, she said that her marriage had become the most important part of her life. I've been in love before, but never in love like this, she said.
She called me up. I was living in New York at the time, and she called me up and said she had something very important to tell me. I just didn't have a clue as to what it was, and she came into the office and said, I'm getting married. And I said, wonderful, congratulations. And then she told me that who she was going to become engaged to, and I was astounded. I was very pleased for her, and then suddenly the news came, well, this would kind of put a damper on her acting career, and a shadow of gloom fell over my face. But at the same time, I realized that this is what she wanted.
Grace's last film before her marriage was High Society. Her co-stars included old friend Bing Crosby.
More adroit about it. Slip it in a hot Mercury or something.
Hey, could I ask you a very personal question?
Anything you want, Ed. You and I are old buddies.
Won't offend you.
Not at all.
How were your love scenes with Grace Kelly?
With La Princesse? Just happens, Ed, that you've touched on a subject that's very close to my heart, because all through the movie, this girl was mad for me. She was fascinated with everything I did.
You could have become a serious composer, or a diplomat, or anything you wanted to be. And what have you become? A jukebox hero.
Oh, I don't know how that piece of film got in there.
Prince Rainier rented a home in Bel Air for a few weeks to be near Grace in Hollywood. The couple gave many press conferences about their future plans during this time. It didn't escape many people's observations that she was about to take on the grandest role of her life. Alfred Hitchcock, upon hearing the news, wryly commented, "I am very happy that Grace has found herself such a good part." While Grace finished High Society, the prince returned to Monaco to finalize plans for the wedding. The entire palace was painted and redecorated in preparation for the grand event. Her last official appearance as Grace Kelly, the actress, was to present Ernest Borgnine with an Academy Award.
Ernest Borgnine in Marty.
It was a bittersweet moment for all of Hollywood.
There was speculation and hope that perhaps she could combine the two careers and continue performing. I think it's unrealistic. I hated to see her leave the screen or the acting profession simply because she was so good. But one just wished her well.
A few weeks later, Grace would begin the transatlantic journey to, as she stated, fulfill her destiny. Grace Kelly's wedding plans made headlines around the world. On April 4th, 1956, Grace arrived at Pier 84 in New York Harbor, along with her family, bridesmaids, her miniature poodle Oliver, and over 80 pieces of luggage. 66 passengers had to be bumped off the SS Constitution to make room for the wedding party. Over 4,000 newspeople had applied for passage, and while most were turned away, there were enough reporters on board to capture almost every moment of the trip. Thousands of well-wishers were there to send her off in a fashion that was somewhat less than royal. Grace, the trooper, handled the uncomfortable situation with her usual composure.
I wonder, Grace, if in this moment of excitement and some slight confusion, if you have any special thoughts about leaving the States, about leaving your country and going on to this new life for you.
Well, Jinx, as I said before, just getting married is a very big step for any girl, and of course, I have a great many feelings about that, and it's a very exciting thing, and I'm very, very happy. Of course, I'm a little sad to be leaving home, but I hope to be back quite often.
First, the status of your citizenship now that you're going to Monaco.
Oh, when I'm married, I will have a dual citizenship. On marrying His Highness, I will become monegasque, but I will also retain my American citizenship.
Does that go for your children, too?
I don't know about that as yet.
When the captain announced the lifeboat drill, over 100 people tried to share Grace's lifeboat. It was said that Grace found the whole affair rather amusing.
She kind of let herself go on the ship and really had a great time. And it was kind of like, in a peculiar way, being at camp, because we were all together for about 5 days. Gradually, everybody started to unwind, and we'd have programs and laugh and jokes and parties into the night. It was a lot of fun.
Realizing she had left behind her life in America forever, as the ship neared Monaco, Grace became more introspective. The wedding party arrived in Monaco harbor after 8 days at sea, and an anxious Rainier met his bride-to-be on board his own yacht, the Dea Giovante. Over 20,000 people lined the streets surrounding the port. This was a day Monaco and the world would never forget. Cannons sounded, planes flew overhead, and thousands of red and white carnations fell from the sky to welcome the American film star. All of Monaco strained to catch a glimpse of their future princess as Grace stepped ashore, but her wide-brimmed white hat hid most of her face, much to the disappointment of the crowd. There were 7 exhausting days of parties and preparations. Over 1,600 reporters and photographers from around the world flooded the tiny country. Little else seemed to matter. It took 2 ceremonies to unite Grace and her prince in royal matrimony. Only immediate family and close friends were allowed in the throne room to witness the civil ceremony, which began on the morning of April 18th. It was broadcast to all of Europe. Grace looked demure in her pale pink 2-piece dress. Rainier may have been royalty, but that day, like a typical bridegroom, he appeared endearingly nervous. During the 40-minute service, Grace listened to the recitation of her 142 official titles, counterparts of Rainier's. A garden reception was held on the palace grounds for all of Monaco's adult citizens. Entertainment included folk singing and dancing, followed by a resplendent show of fireworks. The next morning, guests began to fill Monaco's Cathedral of St. Nicholas for the church wedding. The moment everyone had been waiting for had finally arrived. Grace was escorted down the aisle on the arm of her proud father. She never looked lovelier. Her wedding dress was designed by Helen Rose, MGM's Academy Award-winning costume designer. 36 seamstresses had labored for over 6 weeks on yards and yards of taffeta, silk, and Brussels lace. Grace's gown was emulated by brides everywhere. Rainier had designed his own outfit, fashioned after the uniform of Napoleon's marshals. The 600 guests included dignitaries from around the world. Royalty, finding true love amidst a fairy tale backdrop, came to life in what was called the wedding of the century. After several hours of receptions and appearances, the newlyweds boarded the Dia Gigante and sailed off into the sunset. They were off on a 7-week honeymoon cruise around the Mediterranean. Grace and Rainier were anxious for this time to get to know each other. Beyond all of the formalities, they were simply 2 young people in love, eager to spend some time alone. Grace had very little time to prepare for her new role as Princess of Monaco. She had the gargantuan task of adjusting to marriage, royal status and protocol, a new language, and a 225-room palace. Homesickness, estrangement from family and friends, these adjustments would be monumental for any woman. But Princess Grace was not just any woman. And soon there was yet another adjustment that needed to be made.
Ask you either or both to explain what will happen in the event twins are born. A boy second and a girl first. Who would be the ruling monarch?
The normal successor would be the eldest of the children, even if it's a girl, but that doesn't mean that she will rule, because she can always resign or abdicate in favor of her younger brother, and he would then rule.
Are twins expected?
Not that I know of.
The palace began preparing for the arrival of the first royal heir. Princess Caroline was born on January the 23rd, 1957, exactly 9 months and 4 days after Grace and Rainier's wedding. 21 cannon blasts were fired to announce the birth of the little princess. A national holiday was declared, school was dismissed, gambling ceased for the day, and free champagne was served throughout the principality. Just over a year later, another celebration was heralded by 101 cannon blasts, signifying the birth of a boy. Grace had produced a son for Monaco, who could now supersede Caroline as heir to the throne. The new little prince was named Albert. Suddenly, people wanted to know more about this exquisite far-off country. Tourism dollars doubled after Grace's arrival, and the number of daily visitors skyrocketed to over 1 million. The prince had an official agenda that at times excluded Grace, and she sometimes felt lonely. She frequently corresponded to her friends back home. To her former roommate Marilyn, she wrote, "Please, let me know what you're doing, and all the news and gossip you can think of. I love to hear what is happening where I am not." In 1962, the press announced that Grace had been offered the lead in Alfred Hitchcock's Marnie. Grace had been showered with film offers ever since her wedding, but she always had to decline. This time, even Prince Rainier, sensing her frustration, consented to her working with Hitchcock once again. Grace was excited as they discussed her taking the role, but it was not meant to be. The citizens of Monaco were not happy with the news. They could not imagine their dignified princess on the silver screen. Sadly, Grace was forced to choose her responsibilities to Monaco over a renewed career. After the birth of Stephanie in 1965, she dedicated herself to combining motherhood with social duty. She became one of the first celebrities to publicly support the La Leche League, which promotes breastfeeding.
I would have liked to have nursed my babies for a longer period of time, but in the beginning, when they needed me and I them, there were no compromises. The state had to wait on mother.
Compelled by the Kelly drive instilled by her father, she also spent much of her time improving the institutions of Monaco. She created an assistance center, which set up volunteers to visit residents at the Home for the Aged in Monaco. And every year, she held a Christmas party for the local orphans. The glamorous princess always made sure the holidays were special for all of the citizens of Monaco. The creation of the Garden Club gave her a chance to share her love of flowers. Though these were very productive years for Grace, it wasn't all roses. Time was passing for the woman whose trademark had been her astonishing good looks. Rainier and Grace's increasingly divergent interests naturally took them apart, perhaps more than either one of them had wanted. But Grace and Rainier were each other's best assets, and they continued to work together in reviving Monaco as a cultural center. The Princess Grace Foundation was established to encourage local artisans. The foundation still exists and sponsors cultural events such as ballets and operas.
The film you're going to see is about the children of Theatre Street in Leningrad.
In 1977, Grace ended her long absence from film by narrating the 90-minute feature documentary about the Kirov Ballet School in Russia, The Children of Theatre Street. The Earl Mack film was nominated for an Academy Award. Grace had finally found fulfillment by using the talent she had put aside for so long. With Monaco's blessing, she also began a long series of poetry readings in Europe and America.
God made the great light, the greater one to dominate the day, and the lesser one to dominate the night.
She was happy to work with well-respected actors, and she won much praise from the artistic community. Back home, the press became an even bigger intrusion into the lives of Grace's photogenic children. Caroline, Albert, and Stephanie had to learn from an early age that theirs was a life of social duty and family obligation, and exposure. But despite this intrusion, Grace and Rainier made sure that the children always had strong family ties. In 1982, the Prince and Princess celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary. With the children getting older, this could have been the perfect time to rediscover the love that brought them together. But sadly, this was not meant to be. On September 13th, 1982, Princess Grace and her daughter Stephanie were driving from Roc-Argel, their country home, to nearby Monaco. At about 10 a.m., the car swerved off the treacherous mountain road and went over an embankment. Initial news stories reported that the accident was minor and that Grace had only broken her leg. But the reality was much more serious. Grace had suffered extreme brain damage and was in a coma. She died the following day when Prince Rainier and his children, having been told nothing more could be done for her, took her off life support. While the world was stunned by her sudden death, there were extensive investigations into the exact cause of the accident. It was finally determined that Grace suffered a stroke or aneurysm of the brain, which caused her to lose control of the car while driving along the treacherous roadway. Nearly 100 million people around the world watched her funeral on television. Some time after Grace's death, a memorial was held for her by her Hollywood friends at a church in Beverly Hills. Jimmy Stewart delivered the eulogy. "You know, I just love Grace Kelly. Not because she was a princess, not because she was an actress, not because she was my friend, but because she was just about the nicest lady I ever met. Grace brought into my life, as she brought into yours, a soft, warm light every time I saw her, and every time I saw her was a holiday of its own. No question, I'll miss her. We'll all miss her. God bless you, Princess." Tragically, Grace never lived to witness Caroline's marriage to Stefano Casiraghi, which produced her first 3 grandchildren. Princess Stephanie has had success as a clothing designer, model, and singer. She is now the mother of a boy and a girl. And Prince Albert, the child who is said most to resemble his mother, is expected to take his father's place someday. He has been groomed for the position since the day he was born. Grace's 11 feature films have endured the test of time, and most are considered classics today. She left behind a loving family and a country which will always bear the imprint of her presence and the heartache of her absence. After her death, Rainier spoke about his loss. He had the regrets any loving spouse might have. He deeply wished he could have spent more time with his wife. Princess Grace was buried in the Grimaldi family crypt inside the cathedral. Hundreds of visitors continue to visit the site every day. 2 years after her death, a rose garden near the Monaco Palace was dedicated to Princess Grace. It is a fitting tribute to a woman who had a passion in life for flowers. Grace was just a little girl when she wrote this poem about a flower, and perhaps even herself. Little flower, you're a lucky one. You soak in all the lovely sun, you stand and watch it all go by and never once do bat an eye, while others have to fight and strain against the world and its every pain of living. But you must too have wars to fight. The cold bleak darkness of every night, of a bigger vine which seeks to grow and is able to stand the rain and snow, and yet you never let it show on your pretty face.